I'm curious, like in terms of the dragons and the Elohim, because this is the first time, like I've heard of the Elohim being, you know, a collective of creators from Sirius, you know, like they're from the star system Sirius, and that the Elohim are, but these Elohim that I've, you know, heard from the people that I've interviewed, right? Like I've interviewed people on our show, so they're entirely benevolent and they don't have an agenda other than their creators expressing life. And I'm
Yes.
wondering if you're finding like there are different types of what were called Elohim, and maybe that was a broad term that was put upon any of these ET extraterrestrial beings, and they were all kind of gathered up in that. Maybe some of them were dragon-like, maybe some of them weren't. What's your understanding?
Yes, I think, Kat, you said it exactly right. I think the word Elohim was a very broad word. It means the powerful ones. And in the Bible, we see that word used. It's the oldest word in the Bible that gets translated as God. In Escaping from Eden, I argue we shouldn't translate it that way. Let's use the root meaning of the powerful ones. And what emerges is, just as you say, a kaleidoscope of entities with a hand in Project Earth and Project Humanity. You get to Genesis 6, and then the Bene Elohim turn up. And I argue that what that represents in the minds of the writers, they are saying ones like the powerful ones. So a second wave, a second incursion. Get further into the Hebrew scriptures, and you've got a council referenced, a sky council, a confederation of entities, some of which are three-dimensional, physical like ourselves, some of which appear to be energy-based beings, all in some kind of an arrangement, an agreement of how they're going to jostle against each other in the project of managing the earth. Now, that all sounds very strange, and you might think it's just the eccentric imagination of one writer, except that cultures all around the world talk about a sky council with diverse entities on it. Ancient Greece has that same language. Sumeria had the same language, with far more detail on what the arguments and conflicts were. Certainly in the Bible, you can see that they do conflict against each other. You've got conflicting demographics with conflicting agendas, and sometimes thousands of human beings get slaughtered in those conflicts. But bring it to the present day, it was only 2 Christmases ago that Brigadier General Haim Eshed, Israel's former chief of space security, stepped up to the microphone and said that on the basis of his 27 years of experience in that role, his understanding is that we are already in contact with a diversity of spacefaring civilizations who form an intergalactic federation, was his word, which has chosen not to self-disclose until you and I have a better understanding of what space is. Now, again, it sounds very far out, but anyone who studies world mythology or ancestral narratives knows that Haim Eshed is only saying the same thing our elders have been saying for thousands of years. And so that I come to believe that is the case, that it's not just a funny coincidence that all these cultures have put this into narratives they've curated. And when I say curated, I mean they have protected from destruction at various times, because through history, empire and colonizing powers have tried to eradicate these stories and explanations from human memory and have never succeeded. The information somehow always survives.
Yeah, not completely. Some things, Library of Alexandria, for example, didn't make it, but other
No,
strains stay
but
alive.
you see, that's an interesting case in point, because the library itself did not survive. And centuries later, we can find copies of books that we know were in the library. So we can begin to piece together what the scope of that knowledge was that was lost in the year dot. And similarly, with the incineration of the libraries of the Mayan-based cultures in Central and South America, we know a little of what was destroyed because a few copies have survived, enough that we can sort of triangulate them and think, oh my goodness, there was a whole developed worldview that we lost for a while and then had to recover.